Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to today's video, which is my Nonfiction November TBR. Now, it feels so good to say that little intro because it has literally been a month since I sat down and filmed. So my apologies if I'm a little bit rusty here. So if you saw my October TBR, you know that I took off the month of October because I was going to be traveling for both work. I went to Chicago, and then for pleasure because I went to Iceland for a week, and it was phenomenal. It was cold, it was windy, there were a couple rainy days, but I had the time of my life. So I basically just took October off. I was still reading, but I wasn't filming. So apologies again if I'm a little bit rusty. But I am so excited to come back in time to film this video for Nonfiction November. It's a reading initiative, or readathon if you want to call it that I am very, very excited about every single year. So Olive from over at ABookOlive has been doing this reading initiative for a number of years. I think she said 7 or 8 years at this point, and the idea is to encourage everyone to read a little bit more nonfiction than they normally do. And Olive comes up with these one-word prompts that you're able to interpret in any way that you really want to, and that's what I'm trying to do. I am trying to check off the 4 prompts that she has, and I'm trying to do it twice. So for each prompt, I have 2 books. And that's really going to be the focus of my reading for the month of November. But I do have a couple fiction books that I do want to tackle because of some other reading goals I have in mind. So why don't we dive right in? So the first prompt that Olive gave us was collection. And one of the books I want to read for that is A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders, which is a collection of, I believe, 7 essays. And this was one of my most anticipated releases of 2021. It came out at the beginning of the year, but I haven't had a chance to get around to it yet, so I definitely want to now. This is very much up my alley for anyone who is a regular viewer of my videos and subscriber to my channel. So George Saunders teaches an MFA program at Syracuse University, and he talks about Russian short stories, and this is all of his essays exploring Russian short stories by the likes of Gogol and Chekhov and Tolstoy, basically the literary giants in Russian literature. Brittany, how many times can you say literature? But basically these literary giants that I know, that I love, that I studied, but for the most part, like when it came to their full-length works. So I am very, very curious about this as like a sometimes writer, and as someone who is really into these particular authors and all of that. So I am really excited about it. As I said, it was an anticipated release. I did get it basically right as it came out, but it's kind of just been sitting at the very top of my TBR, and I haven't gotten around to it. So that's the case with this one, and I've really heard some good things about it. So I think this is the first of the books that I want to tackle. In a similar vein, which again, this is not going to be surprising for anyone who watches this channel, we have Think, Write, Speak, Uncollected Essays, Reviews, Interviews, and Letters by Vladimir Nabokov. And so this is a collection of everything that I just said: essays, reviews, interviews, and letters. And I actually got this book as part of the Page One subscription box, which was very, very exciting. This is obviously another Russian author that we're dealing with, another Russian author that I am less familiar with than the others, because I definitely stuck more with the 19th and early 20th century Russians when I was in school than I did anything more contemporary. However, Nabokov was a professor at my undergraduate university. There was a lounge for the English majors bearing his name, and so there is some sort of like connection here. But I do think this is a good option for this prompt as well. I'm hoping that I enjoy it, even perhaps not knowing as much about him as the other authors from the other book by George Saunders, but I did think this was a good option for this prompt as well. Okay, moving right along to prompt 2, which is industry. And the way that I chose to go about this particular prompt is to select 2 books that I feel like will give me a deeper understanding of a particular industry. And I guess in some cases these people could also be considered industrious. But the first book that I want to try to get to is In the Heart of the Sea, The Tragedy of the Whale Ship Essex by Nathaniel Philbrick. And this is a National Book Award winner, as you can see by the seal. And it is a really interesting story, and this has kind of been moldering on my bookshelf for way too long. But basically, what happens with this book is that there is a whale ship, the Essex, in the 19th century that is rammed by a sperm whale and ends up sinking. And the crew ends up going on this like crazy sort of like voyage, I think, in their lifeboats, from which only 8 survive, and in order to survive there's like some cannibalism going on, and it's really dark, very sinister, but I do think that you're going to learn a lot about whaling in particular as an industry that for a large part of the world has now died out. But this has definitely resonated with me more now, having come back from Iceland. Whales are still at large in that part of the world, and actually a sperm whale had washed up onto a shore of a beach that I was visiting sometime during the summer, and what was left were the bones, so I got to look at that up close and personal, and they are huge and they are heavy. So this is like another connection to this book that I do think will be quite interesting. And as I said, it is very dark, it is very sinister. The cannibalism element is not going to be for everyone, especially if you're squeamish, but I'll let you know how like graphic it gets once I've read it. The next book is quite different. It's more of a biography, and it also tackles an industry that is far more modern than whaling, and that is The 12 Lives of Alfred Hitchcock by Edward White. And this is looking at the film industry and Alfred Hitchcock in particular. So I am a huge bibliophile. That's how I ended up creating this channel in the first place. But I am also a huge cinephile. I love movies. I love the entire industry, basically from silent films up to contemporary times. Alfred Hitchcock and some of his movies are among some of my favorites, and the ones that I probably watch the most frequently whenever the mood strikes. So I am very, very interested to read this. I think it's also a really interesting approach to the man, the myth, the legend that is Alfred Hitchcock, because essentially each chapter is looking at a facet of Alfred Hitchcock. So there's one that's on him as like an entertainer, and one about him as a womanizer, and I think there's one about him like as a father or a family man, that sort of thing. So each chapter really like hones in on a particular aspect of him to give you a better understanding of the man. But you really can't separate Alfred Hitchcock from the film industry. He is the master of suspense. He was an incredible director, so I do feel like you're going to get a little bit of history into not only the industry that he worked in, but also a lot of his films. So this should be really interesting as well. The next prompt is style, and I chose to go with people who have style for this one, which I feel like is not a very imaginative interpretation, but I did have 2 books about it that I was very, very excited about. So the first is The Barbizon, The Hotel That Set Women Free by Paulina Bren, and this is all about the Barbizon Hotel in Manhattan, which was like the first women's only residential hotel, and it is a place that like Sylvia Plath, I believe, stayed in, Grace Kelly, Liza Minnelli, Felicia Rashad, Sybil Shepherd, Joan Didion, Meg Wolitzer. Like the Ford Modeling Agency kept their models there. Mademoiselle magazine also kept some of their staff there, and it was this really liberating sort of place for these women to live during this particular time in history. The woman on the cover is quite stylish in my opinion, and I do think that this is going to be really, really interesting as far as looking at Manhattan during this particular time period. So that is why I chose it. This very stylish woman on the cover, but basically the women who are in here are style icons, both in the sort of wardrobe sense, but also in the ways that they lived their lives. So I felt like this fit the bill for this particular prompt as well. The next book, admittedly, might be a little bit of a stretch. I know that. I don't think the subject matter of the book has anything to do with style, but the people that the book discusses definitely live a particular lifestyle that we attribute to them, and I would also say that the members of this particular family are style icons that we then see reflected back in the clothes that everyday people wear. And so the family that I'm talking about is the British royal family, and the book that I'm talking about is The Crown in Crisis: Countdown to the Abdication by Alexander Larman. And this is a book that is all about the abdication of King Edward of England in order to marry Wallis Simpson. And at the time, it caused this huge constitutional crisis in the UK because Wallis Simpson was, first of all, an American, but more importantly, she was a two-time divorcee, and with King Edward being the head of the Church of England, that was a huge stumbling block. So this is an exploration into kind of what happened leading up to the abdication. And I am really into the British royal family, the history of it. I, in general, am really interested in royalty. But my mother is from the UK. I grew up hearing her idolize Princess Diana. I've always been interested in the story of Wallis Simpson and King Edward and how that gave us, effectively, Queen Elizabeth II today. So this is something that I'm really, really looking forward to. I've also read a few books that kind of touched on this a little bit. I read an entire biography on Wallis Simpson earlier this year, and then I also read a novel that was about another one of King Edward's mistresses before Wallis Simpson, although Wallis does make an appearance towards the end, if I remember rightly. But yeah, we're gonna keep riding that wave, keep riding that train, see if this book offers any other insights into the abdication that the biography on Wallis Simpson might not have. Alright, and the final prompt from Olive is treatment, and I've decided to go the medical treatment route because I do really enjoy medical history type books. I've discovered that about myself since I started this channel. And so one of the books that I want to try to read is called Blitzed: Drugs in the Third Reich by Norman Ohler, I believe is how you pronounce the last name, and that is not my camera not focusing, that is the font. It gives me a headache, so avert your eyes momentarily if it does the same to you. But this is a book that I picked up not that long ago. I think it was one of my most recent trips to my favorite bookstore in Manhattan, McNally Jackson, and this is a book all about how basically during the Third Reich drugs were rampant. Like, soldiers were being ordered to take certain drugs. Hitler, as a lot of people know, was on quite a few drugs as well, and so this is exploring that history of drug treatment and drug misusage and all of that sort of thing. And I do feel like it's going to be a really interesting and unique type of history. I am really interested in World War II and in World War I, actually, but I do feel like a lot of the times the books are kind of on the same subject. This was completely new ground for me, so I am very interested in reading this one, and drugs and treatment kind of seem to go hand in hand for me. And speaking of World War I, the next book is also, as I in my preamble explained, about medical treatment, and that is No Man's Land, the trailblazing women who ran Britain's most extraordinary military hospital during World War I, and this is by Wendy Moore. And this is a book that I believe it is on my 5-star predictions, so I definitely want to get to it before the end of the year, but this is so up my alley. So it's about these 2 suffragettes who are among the first women to operate on men, and then they're actually begged to open this hospital in London, which is staffed almost entirely by women, and treat thousands of soldiers during World War I. And this is obviously at a time when women in a profession, let alone a medical profession, was pretty novel. It wasn't a common occurrence at all. And so there's so much about this book that I'm really interested in. World War I, the feminist angle, the medical history angle. I am just all there for it, which is also why I think this is going to be a 5-star read for me, why I considered it a 5-star prediction for this year. So I am very, very much looking forward to reading this one. And then the next 2 books have nothing to do with Nonfiction November, but I am going to try to continue reading the Outlander series. I am very, very, very far behind. I am currently about halfway through book 6, and I still need to read book 7 and book 8, and book 9 comes out later this month. So I am very, very far behind, but I'm still trying to finish them at least by the end of this year. So I do want to finish A Breath of Snow and Ashes. I don't know why that title, something about that title, I can never get it right the first time. A Breath of Snow and Ashes, which is book 6. I want to finish that in the next week or so, so I'll probably be reading that in the evening, reading nonfiction in the morning when I first wake up, and then I want to start and hopefully finish An Echo in the Bone, which is book 7 this month, which, the thing is, as I've talked about these books a million times on this channel, they're all really thick, but the really, really sad thing is that this book is, let's see, how many pages? About 1,150 pages, which is gargantuan, but it feels small in comparison to A Breath of Snow and Ashes, which is nearly 1,500 pages long. That one is nearly as long as my mass market paperback War and Peace. So just reading these 2 books alone, I still have 1,800 pages of these alone to read this month. But I figure if I just read a few pages of it a day over the course of the month, I can manage it. But yes, so the 2 Outlander books have nothing to do with Nonfiction November, but I am still going to try to read them. So yeah, those are the books that I am trying to read in November. It is very, very ambitious. I know that. I also know that it's very on brand for me. But what I think I'm going to try to do is basically go through one cycle of the Nonfiction November books and then start it again and try to read the second book for each prompt and see how many I get through that way. It is still 8 books, so it is quite a bit, especially when I'm also trying to read the Outlander books at the same time. And that is for sure my Sisyphean task of 2021. I might not finish them in time for the 9th book that is coming out later this month, but by the end of 2021, all of these books will be read. That is my goal. But anyway, I do hope that you were able to add a few of these books to your TBR, and if you're participating in Nonfiction November, let me know in the comment section and let me know which books you're most excited to read for that. But I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe because it means the world to me, and I will see you next time. Bye!